Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
And we are coming down to the finish line of 1982. This is our penultimate 1982 episode. We'll be adding a couple more songs to the playlist. I'm wrapping up my duties, basically, for 1982 today, I think, right? My final songs.
I feel like I am too. So what's happening on our last episode? Is it the Mike show?
I guess it's going to be the Mike Bot show.
Yeah.
It's going to be the Mike Bot show. And I've been pulling my hair out because Mike is dragging his feet on picking his album, and he's changing his mind. There's been way more shuffling of songs for 1982 than in previous episodes. I've had a whole list of songs that were on the playlist at one time that have been relegated and replaced by other songs. We kind of had a little miscommunication early on when we did our lists, so I thought there were songs that you wanted that you didn't really want. And so that added to the confusion. So I've had all these songs that I've been listening to on the playlist, kind of trying them out and deciding what's going to stay and what's not.
I think it almost gets more confusing when we have more choices, because when it was narrowed down, you knew which ones were just definitely in first place, second place, but then you kind of get the stragglers of maybe like 10 songs that I feel like could all be worthy of the playlist, but then you have to pick between all those. So
yeah, and like 1981 and 82 is another banner year for singles, and we're getting into this really golden era of pop music with the emergence of MTV. The second British invasion is really starting to hit toward the end of 1982, and then in 83 it's going to be in full flower. And that's interesting in the context of one of the songs we're going to talk about today, because it's an artist and a song that's really going against the grain of prevailing trends in music at this time. That would be John Cougar, and one of the big hit singles off of his breakthrough album, American Fool. Believe it or not, his sixth record. It took him a while to find his footing, and boy, did he with this record in 1982. Also, we're going to revisit something we talked about early on when we did our Toto episode. The guys in Toto are heavyweight session musicians. They played on a ton of different records in this era, including the biggest record of all time, which comes out end of November 1982. Of course, Michael Jackson's Thriller. We're going to push that back a little bit into 1983, because that's when the big singles off that album were all released. The first single release was the Paul McCartney duet, The Girl Is Mine, which actually came out around the same time the album did, at the end of November in 82. But the real big singles, and I don't want to denigrate, I think we kind of pay that song short shrift. I really like it. Paul McCartney is a very good, soulful singer, and he holds his own in these duets with, two of the great black singers of the era, Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder, during this time period.
I totally agree 100% with that. It's not his singing or his performance to me. It's the songs. It's just the songs themselves are just so lightweight and cheese.
Not the singer, it's the songs.
Yes. This Girl Is Mine was recorded first before anything else on Thriller. And it does kind of not fit on the album to me.
I think they knocked it out pretty quickly, right? I mean, as opposed to, the labor that went into this album for months.
Which that's okay. Like, I think the song sounds good and the performances are good, but I just think that as far as the writing and the actual song itself, it just doesn't fit to me with the rest of Thriller.
You just don't like The Doggone Girl Is Mine. That just gets your back up.
The Doggone Girl Is Mine. I mean, who else would say that besides Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson, I guess? Like, no one else would sing that in a song and be serious.
So we'll probably have a special episode dedicated to Michael Jackson's Thriller when we get into 1982. But one of the songs that I'm choosing and going back to that we spoke about earlier in the Toto episode was the Donna Summer album that came out in 1982, produced by Quincy Jones, a song that feels to me like the greatest song Michael Jackson ever recorded, and that's Love Is in Control, parentheses, Finger on the Trigger, which was actually a top 10 hit in 82 that somehow flew under the radar for me. I don't recall hearing this song at the time.
I heard it at the grocery store the other day. It was playing. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. It does have a familiarity about it, but it's not a song I know or really think I remember. But yeah, I was kind of shocked.
I think the familiarity stems from just the Quincy Jones big production. It sounds like something that would have been on Thriller, but it wasn't, or on Off the Wall. It came out in between, which leads one to wonder. I mean, did Michael Jackson get a crack at this song first and then passed on it? And then Donna Summer got her chance? Who knows? That's never been specified one way or the other. But it's just a killer track. I mean, it is so funky and groovy and catchy. The sublime parts for me is when that vocoder voice kicks in to set up the chorus, like Super Bullet #1. I just love that. Absolutely love it. The lyric, it's kind of hammering the gun metaphor a little heavy, but it's not about the lyrics. It's about the track on this one, which is just smoking.
Yeah, I was surprised by this whole album. Actually, we've talked about it, like how it just kind of was, like you said, totally under the radar and
a strange potpourri. Yeah.
Yeah. But the singles are both great and popular songs, I guess, in 1982.
Love Is in Control was a top 10 hit. The State of Independence made the Billboard Top 100, didn't crack the top 4. It was just outside
that
the top
one
40. And then you had, The Woman in Me, which is a pretty interesting ballad on this, which could have easily been a hit single as well. The album never did the kind of numbers that they were probably expecting. In fact, it was initially going to be another Giorgio Moroder People Lot production for Donna Summer's next album, but she'd switched record labels recently to Geffen, and they wanted to push her away from the Disco Queen label as far as they could, because, again, here in the early 1980s, this is the post-disco sucks movement, and everybody's, running screaming away from disco as far as they can get, although musically, it's still very much there in popular music. You just can't call it disco anymore if you want to sell records. And unfortunately, for people like Donna Summer and the Bee Gees, there's only so far away you can get from that tag. When you were at the absolute paragon,
the kings and queen of disco.
Right, exactly. So, the Bee Gees put out a very interesting record in 1981, Living Eyes, but nobody wanted to know about it, even though they're still selling massive amounts of records, writing and producing for others at this time, Barry Gibb. But yeah, Donna Summer, I mean, this is still very much in the dance floor vein. It's disco in as much as you would call Michael Jackson's stuff off the wall disco.
Which is pretty disco. I mean, it has the disco beat, the disco rhythm. And even like Want to Be Starting Something, they definitely have that feel to them. And a lot of it is in the drum sound and in the rhythms,
Yeah. But, Donna Summer's a great vocalist. Michael Jackson, obviously very talented vocalist. But the success of these records, a lot of it is the guy at the control board, Quincy Jones and his engineer, Bruce Swedeen, just the incredible cutting edge modern sounds they were getting, the hooks, the groove. They used a lot of the same session musicians on all these albums. Guys that aren't really household names, like David Williams on guitar, John Robinson. John Robinson is probably one of the greatest drummers that nobody knows at all. He's got an incredibly long resume of sessions over the years, but how many, except hardcore music fans, would even recognize that name?
I don't.
Yeah. And for me, I think one of the foundational keys for these Quincy Jones productions is the mix of the digital and the analog, particularly in the rhythm section. You've got live electric bass, usually played by Louis Johnson or the Brothers Johnson, and then synth bass on top of that. And in the drum tracks, you've got, John Robinson or whoever, Jeff Porcaro played on a lot of these hits, mixed with a lot of electronic drums and percussion. So it's the mix of digital and analog in the rhythm section, and it's the layers and layers and layers and layers of percussion that really makes these grooves absolutely sparkle. Nobody was at a higher level production-wise than Quincy Jones at this time. I don't know that anybody's gotten to a higher level in pop music since Quincy Jones at this time.
Well, and how he just orchestrates the entire process. He comes at it from a holistic point of view. You know what I mean? Like he's like managing everything that's going on here.
Yes,
and
very musical guy. He comes out of the jazz world. He was an arranger. He worked with some of the top jazz musicians. He was a contemporary of Ray Charles, both from Seattle area.
And if he calls you, you're going to work with him. Every musician would want to work with him. He's got access to anyone he wants.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. producers could be a whole spectrum of different kind of characters. You've got a guy like Rick Rubin, who is one of the most well-known and successful contemporary producers. I don't know that he plays an instrument at all. I don't know that he has any musical training whatsoever, other than being a fan. Then you got guys like Quincy Jones, who is an extraordinary musical talent and, lends his expertise that way. But yeah, so this record, again, Love Is in Control was a top 10 hit. Somehow it didn't hit the Seattle market, or at least escape my attention when I was in middle school in 1982. But it was a big enough record to make the top 10 nationally. But I think, Geffen was expecting bigger things when they matched Donna Summer with the hottest producer of the era.
And the best session guys.
Yes, right. And there was a lot of money pumped into this record. Certainly not as much money pumped into the videos, which are very forgettable, which, might be part of the reason it didn't hit the mark. I don't know that they took that aspect of it seriously enough. Clearly, Michael Jackson did, because he was groundbreaking in that department, which is a big reason why Thriller was as big a hit as it was.
But this is still right on the cusp of MTV not really being widely available.
Yes. Well, and to whom it was available, just not playing black artists.
No. I think there's also that sense of, is this really going to be something that we need to care about? And especially older artists that had already been around, like Donna Summer, for a while, that we're kind of stepping into this new, videos were definitely embraced by new bands more, I think, than bands that had already been around, because, they were like, how do we know this is even worth our time? Like, is this really something we need to be thinking about or putting money into? So, the videos at that time were so hit and miss. And the ones that actually were decent really stand out because most of them are pretty bad, or they're just like a live clip. There's not a lot of money put into them, and there's not a lot of artistic vision put into them. So it's not surprising to me that her videos were really not that cutting edge. Although she did make videos for She Works Hard for the Money.
Right. Her next album,
popular.
Her next album, They're on the Video Train, and that was very popular video and song.
But by then it was undeniable that video was important.
Yes.
Like it got to the point pretty quickly that it was like, you have to make a video if your song is going to, make any kind of impact.
So this is going to be our third Donna Summer song on the playlist. We had I Feel Love, a Sheryl pick from 1977. Michael chose MacArthur Park.
That's right. Yeah.
Forgot about that, didn't you? And then this could easily have been the fourth, because On the Radio was right there on the borderline for me for 1980 to make the playlist. So you've got these changes happening in popular music, the emergence of music video and MTV, the emergence of new technology, digital technology, synthesizers, electronic drums, and such. And more of an emphasis placed on visuals, on fashion, and a more youthful appearance targeting toward younger listeners, which obviously made it very challenging for the veteran rock artists of the 60s and 70s to continue their careers in this new era. A lot of them floundered and failed. And Sheryl, I guess your second favorite band of all time, probably safe to say, is The Who, behind the Beatles. Is that not?
Mm-hmm.
Speaking out of school, yes. They released their final album of their original run in 1982 called It's Hard. Also, Pete Townshend released his second solo album. I'm not counting Who Came First or Rough Mix. So his second solo album after Empty Glass also comes out in 1982 with the strange title, All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes. So here's a guy, Pete Townshend, who obviously spends a lot of time in contemplation and deep thought and philosophizing about his life in rock and roll in general. He's the guy who sang Hope I Die Before I Get Old in my generation back in 1965, has had to live with that now. Almost 2 decades later, now that he's getting into his latter 30s. It's so funny when you look back on this era, too. These 60 stars and early 70 stars that appeared to be so past their prime in the early 1980s. Some of them are in like their mid-30s.
35, yeah.
They're still kids, for crying out. I mean, but at the time, they just seemed ancient with all these changes in music. So these are the things that Pete is grappling with in 1982. Neither album was looked upon too fondly by music critics at the time.
No. And I think in retrospect, both albums have been reevaluated and reassessed and appreciated. Probably his solo album more than It's Hard. I mean, Pete's such an interesting character. Yes, he's only 35 years old, but he's basically having, you can't really call it a midlife crisis now because he's lived to be over 70, but, in his eyes, a midlife crisis. And for Pete Townsend, what that means is trying to be part of the cool crowd of what the young people are doing in 1982, 1981 really is kind of where this starts. His first, well, like you said, it's not really his first, but his first kind of official solo album, Empty Glass, came out in 1980. And, he's coming off the heels of Keith Moon dying. And once that happened, The Who is up in the air, in flux, and they bring on Kenny Jones from the Small Faces and the Faces, who they've known for years, have a very close relationship with and feel very comfortable with, brought him in. And, we talked about that because I chose You Better You Bet from the Face Dances album as a song for the playlist. Now they have a different drummer, adding a totally different dynamic to the band. And it's very freeing for Pete because Keith Moon is such a difficult drummer to play with, really, because he's so unconventional. He basically does not keep time. He's like constantly playing fills.
Lead drums.
Yes, lead drums, which really did shape the dynamic of that band and the sound of that band.
Yeah, absolutely essential, intrinsic to their sound. Yeah.
Yeah. So now Pete is actually feeling liberated by going the opposite direction and having a total timekeeper in Kenny Jones.
Hey, we can play grooves now.
Yeah, and that opens him up to be able to do more soloing, which he's never really been a soloist. I mean, John Entwistle has been a lead bass player, and then you have a lead drummer. And then Pete's been kind of relegated to rhythm most of the time, and he just never really embraced, a lot of soloing and really leading in that way. The song that I'm choosing from It's Hard is Eminence Front, which is one of the greatest Who songs. And it's amazing and so awesome to me that they have on their last album, their official last album of the band, as everyone knows it, is one of their best songs, really.
Yeah. When they were allegedly out of gas,
Yeah.
And I've been hearing that song lately on TV, like sports, with the baseball playoffs. I think they've been using that in their bumper music.
Well, it works really well for that because it has this long, minute and a half long intro.
With the most massive drum sound ever.
Yeah, I love the drum sound. And really, you get that heavy, punching, deep drum sound.
Yeah, no gated reverb here. It is massive, massive amounts of reverb to the heavens on Kenny Jones drums.
Leading up to this, it's very interesting to me in this era of Pete because he's one of those musicians, kind of like Todd Rundgren is like this too, where he's been using synthesizers since the early 70s and been very cutting edge, as far as knowing how to program them, really spending a lot of time with them that most people, especially in the 70s leading up to the 80s, they were in rock and pop music, did not have either the knowledge or the patience or the interest in really spending the time it takes to understand these instruments that were pretty much just like a computer that took up an entire room. Most of the synthesizer music at that time wasn't in rock or pop. It was like Kraftwerk or Tangerine Dream or, bands that were not rock. And so Pete's one of the few people that brought that into rock music. Of course, you have prog bands and bands like Rush and Yes, that were more like in the prog rock vein where they were still being played on rock stations. But I think because Pete had been using synthesizers for so long that once the 80s came around, it didn't seem very cutting edge anymore, what he was doing, because he was still using a lot of the same synths that he had used in the 70s. And Eminence Front is a good example of that. I mean, he's using like a Yamaha synthesizer that he'd had for years. He's not using like the newest technologies.
Because those Yamaha synths from the late 70s and early 80s were the best.
Yeah.
They were the best.
But, you have a lot of bands at this time using the Mini Moog and the Fairlight, like they're bringing in this new technology, and he was not really doing that. And so even though it does have a modern sound in that sense that he is using synthesizers, the synths he's using on Eminence Front sound like what he was using on Bob O'Reilly, or like 70s synthesizers.
I think that was an ARP that he used on Bob O'Reilly. I want to say, and I think he's still using that in 82. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that Pete really wanted to be part of what was happening in the current times. Like he was actually hanging out with Steve Strange and the Blitz Kids and that whole new romantic movement that we talked about with Duran Duran. He was like totally embracing that culture and part of that. I mean, he also was a total drunk and drug addict too. And so that was that lifestyle, clubbing. But he was really trying to insert himself into the new romantic movement, which he had also done with punk when punk came around. And that's what Who Are You was written about. Like he's trying to hang out with Johnny Rotten and the Sex Pistols and like the Clash and be part of that scene because he's fascinated by it.
Yet he's self-conscious about being this old man. He's
totally self-conscious about being this old man. So you see him from this era. His hair is all combed kind of like flock of seagulls, and he's wearing the big poofy suit jackets. So he looks like he's trying to be contemporary, with the times. And of course, because he's always so self-conscious, he's constantly beating himself up about this. And it comes out in his songwriting. So pretty much, all of his songs are autobiographical once you hit Who by Numbers. What the Who was doing before Who by Numbers, they were still autobiographical, but he was using a character. He was using Tommy, he was using Jimmy for Quadrophenia, a quick one. Like he was writing from a character point of view.
And it seems like he was writing more about his audience than himself, and he saw himself in his audience. But now he's really looking more inward at this point.
Yeah, and that kind of started with Who by Numbers and then just continued. So, a lot of the songs that are on It's Hard, and definitely songs that are on Chinese Eyes, are written from an autobiographical standpoint. There's just a lot of self-loathing there and a lot of, introspection in that way. And he was self-medicating too. He was definitely like the most out of control he'd been. So when It's Hard came around, Face Dances wasn't very well received. It did have You Better You Bet was a hit for them. They were contending with the audience and that whole transition into Kenny Jones and a different sound. Pete kind of just like fell to rock bottom between 81 and 82.
Well, you had the trauma of the Riverfront Stadium incident too, where fans were killed trying to get into a Who show. Like 11 people.
11 people, right? And they continued on the tour. They never stopped. They didn't ever take the time to like really process that or reach out to the families. And Pete still talks about that in interviews about how that was handled poorly. And they were still grappling with that. Basically, Pete was a mess. The band was still forging ahead and ready to go. And Roger, he never wanted the Who to stop, and he still doesn't. But the Who needs Pete Townsend. He's the principal songwriter. He is what makes the band. But Pete doesn't need the Who. He can still do his own thing without them. So by the time It's Hard came around, they had booked a tour. One of the things I think that really gives It's Hard a bad rap is that it was a rush job. They had to finish the album because they had the tour booked. It ended up being their farewell tour, I say in quotes, because of course it wasn't. They started touring again in 89.
The live album was called Who's Last?
Yeah. So I think It's Hard does suffer from the fact that it was rushed. There's issues with production in that album on certain songs. I think they don't get the best sound from these songs. But really, there are a lot of really great songs on this album. And I think both Face Dances and It's Hard, if taken just separately and away from the Who catalog, would actually be considered really good albums. It's just that it's hard not to compare it.
We talked about this before. I think if they had not put the Who moniker on them, it would have served them better. Obviously, the record label wanted that for marketing. But once Keith Moon is gone, what made the Who special was you had these four very distinct individuals coming together with John Entwistle, the greatest rock and roll bass player, nonpareil as far as I'm concerned. Keith Moon, the wild man drummer with his inimitable style. Pete Townsend playing, lead rhythm guitar simultaneously, trying to fit in where he can with these two guys. And then, Roger Daltrey, one of the great rock vocalists, and the mouthpiece for a lot of his writing. Roger really didn't write. Once you take Moon out of that mix, it's no longer the Who. It's just not.
Yeah.
And as good a drummer as Kenny Jones is, and he is a very good drummer, very good drummer, it's different. It's a different beast now. You still want to have Roger Daltrey singing Pete's songs because he does write very well for Roger's voice. Not all the time, but often.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you handle this. I mean, it must have been a difficult decision to carry on and then carry on with that name. But it's not going to be the same. And I think, Kenny Jones got the brunt of the criticism from fans, I think, undeservedly. I mean, Jesus, the drums on Eminence Front. I mean, that is the song. That drum sound is just so huge and killer. And he is such a great groove player. And they did a lot of interesting things on Face Dance. I don't think It's Hard is as strong as album as Face Dances, but neither album is as bad as they were perceived to be at the time. Much better, in fact. I had It's Hard a long time ago and traded it in, but back in my collection revisiting it now, it's still a worthy album. It's just nothing is going to hold up to Quadrophenia and Who's Next. We're talking about some of the greatest rock music ever recorded. So, you just cannot expect that they're going to meet those same high standards. But you're right. You got to look at these albums kind of separately from the rest of the Who catalog and judge them on their own merits. New musical era, new personnel, new sound, new sounds, bringing a lot more contemporary sounds into the mix. Roger Daltrey is singing as good as he ever did at this point in the band's run, I think. It's just, it's different. It's different. It's not the old Who. It's a new, maybe they could have been the new Who or just come up with some clever spin on the name, but I think that would have served them a lot better if they just tweaked it somehow enough to separate it and have it be judged more on its own merits than against their massive heights from the turn of the 70s.
Well, I've been listening to It's Hard a lot in the last week. And actually, it's kind of interesting how I've noticed, and this surprised me, there's a lot of songs on this album that actually do sound a lot like what they were doing, starting with Who by Numbers. Like I said, the band really changed at that point. And I think Keith was already deteriorating. And Who Are You is very noticeable that the drums are nothing like what he'd been before. And so that already started to change their sound. And Pete's doing more introspective writing. Roger is singing from a more theatrical. He was very theatrical with Tommy. That is a theatrical production. And that's where he started kind of doing that. But you get into songs like Guitar and Pen and they have this, just a very theatrical sense to them. And Roger continues to do that. And Pete is continuing to write that way, from Who Are You up to Face Dances up to. And so there were some songs on there that I was like, this song could have fit on Who by Numbers, or, it's like their sound really isn't that different. It's just a lot different from everything pre Who by Numbers, which is what most people know the band for. The 60s stuff, and then Tommy, and then Quadrophenia, Who's Next, it feels a lot different than those albums. And I think there's some of his best songs, like Cry If You Want is a great song. And that is a song that has these militant drums that Kenny Jones is amazing on that song. So I think that it is definitely an album that should be revisited. Eminence Front, one of the things that I love about this song too is that Pete sings it. I always love it when Pete sings lead on a Who song. I don't think he really intended to, but Glenn Johns actually was the one that said, no, you're going to sing the song. And that was the first take. So it does have a very live feel to it. It's not super polished, except the drums are, they're very precise. And just the structure of the song is really unusual too, because it starts out with that synthesizer that goes on for quite a while. It's 30 seconds, I think, where it's just the synthesizer. And then the drums come in, and then you get that that goes throughout the whole song. And then you have a guitar solo. He does a guitar solo at the beginning of the song. And it isn't until 2 minutes before the vocals come in. So it's just structured odd in that way. And there's no bass until the chorus. And then you get the real flourishy lead bass of John. That's super cool in that part, but the verses don't really have any bass. John's just playing like one note through all the verses. So that's really unusual for them too. Once again, it is a very autobiographical account of what Pete is seeing in the music business, Eminence Front, which is kind of one of the coolest song titles, really, and like just phrases.
Well, he's quite the wordsmith.
Yeah. But, just talking about like the excess in the music business and how people are living and that it's a front, cokes flying everywhere, like the whole lifestyle.
Himself included.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I really feel like for that era, sound-wise, this song really captures the... I mean, this is very cutting-edge, modern-sounding rock music for 1982. When I hear the track, I think of Phil Collins in The Air Tonight. I think of the Tangerine Dream music on the Risky Business soundtrack, just really modern sounding. It just kind of creates this visual picture, like Miami Vice, like the music on Miami Vice. Just it kind of slots into that kind of vibe for me.
Yeah, and they were keeping up with the times in that way, kind of like Rush was at this time too, where they were going for a more modern sound. But Pete's been doing that for so long that it doesn't sound out of character either for the band. Like that synth part does not sound out of character for the band. Does sound
very
modern,
easy,
but it fits.
Synthesizers a natural thing for them, because they've been messing around with them since before most of these older rockers were. He was on the absolute cutting edge.
I also think it's interesting that both of those solo albums he did at the same time as Who albums. He was doing Empty Glass and Face Dances at the same time. We've got Chinese Eyes and It's Hard around the same time. And he had actually got himself cleaned up, went through detox and got off of coke, heroin, alcohol as he was going into recording his solo album. And during It's Hard, because he pretty much had to, or he was going to die. He actually OD'd twice. Once was with Phil Lynott. He was with Phil Lynott at Steve Strange's club and woke up with a needle in his arm and he almost died. So, it had gotten to a desperate point for him, and he did clean himself up. Then he moved on to doing his solo album, which is basically him writing about all of the things that he had done that he regretted, sort of culminating in this idea. There's a song on his solo album called The Sea Refuses No River.
The best song on the album, I think.
Mm-hmm. And it's taken from spiritual texts and ideas too, about that, like the river flows into God. Everything makes its way to God eventually. And no matter how much sewage or how much, whatever is in there, it comes out clean in the end. And that's basically where, he was living at that point. That was his life. So I think that when he does his solo albums and the Who albums at the same time, you have songs that really could not work with the Who. They would not work with Roger's voice. They had to be sung by Pete. And Pete's using amazing session musicians on his solo albums, and he's expanding the sound. He's using, different instruments and
the Butler Brzezicki rhythm section back for this album. He'd used them on Empty Glass. Simon Phillips on
brilliant
drums.
Drummer. Yeah. Mark Brzezicki and Tony Butler, who would become Big Country. They're the rhythm section too on some of the songs.
Chris Stainton on keyboards, that are very well-known session player.
Virginia Astley on keyboards, plays on Slit Skirts. And there are some classic songs on Chinese Eyes too, which, okay, it is a strange title, and Pete even admits now it's probably one of the worst titles ever. But there's a whole story in the album jacket. It's about these old Western cowboys like John Wayne, and when they're out, riding in the dust is flying at them and their eyes, are closed. That's where the Chinese Eyes comes in. But anyway, some of his best songs that he's ever written are on that album. But that album is really where he's trying to be more modern. There's a few songs on there that have, they're very keyboard heavy. He's doing this kind of like poetry behind music, lots of words. And he made videos for these songs. And there was an MTV video special that he put out that had videos for like 4 or 5 of the songs. And it's just like a little behind the scenes of him in his day sort of thing that MTV asked him to do. And also, he was one of the first people to, how they used to have those, I want my MTV.
Of course.
He was one of the first people to do that. And there he is, with his funny hairdo and looking like he's trying to look young. So, I mean, he was a big supporter of MTV early on and also making videos. So, I think he was more cutting edge with his solo work at that time. But he still was working with The Who. So he kind of had his foot in both camps, which is always kind of confusing too, I think. Because a lot of people have this attitude like, Pete saved the best songs for his solo albums, like especially with Empty Glass. People say that about, Face Dances. He took all the best songs and put it on Empty Glass. But I see his solo career and The Who as such completely different animals that I don't see a lot of crossover there that could happen. I mean, there is some, but for the most part, I mean, at least 3/4 of the songs on, well, maybe half on Chinese Eyes, Roger would never sing. Like he just would never sing like Uniforms or Communication or, he just wouldn't. So I think it's totally valid that he had a solo career and The Who going at the same time.
Critics clearly preferred the Addicted Pete to the Clean Pete because this pretty much trashed by music critics at the time. It didn't sell in nearly the quantities that Empty Glass did, and it didn't have an obvious single. That didn't help.
No.
But this is from Robert Christgau's record guide, the 80s. This is just brutal. What intelligence must have gone into this album? What craft? What personal suffering? What tax-deductible business expenditure? In 1982, at 37, Townes has somehow managed to conceive, record, and release a confessional song suite, the pretentiousness of which could barely be imagined by an acid-damaged Bard drama major. That is, it's pretentious at an unprecedented level of difficulty. You have to pay years of dues before you could twist such long words into such unlikely rhymes and images and martial arrangements of such intricate meaninglessness. A stupendous achievement, D+. Ouch. Ouch. So this is an album clearly that requires a long time to sink in. I mean, it's not immediate at all. I listened to it once, didn't get it, and again, the first impression is, wow, really wordy, very dense. Second listen, now the songs start to stand out. The Sea Refuses No River, Exquisitely Bored, Somebody Save Me, all really strong.
Slit Skirts
probably fourth, for me. But again, this is an album you got to be a fan, and it's going to take several listens for a lot of it to sink in.
Yeah, and Pete is pretentious. I mean, everyone knows that. Yeah, that's just right. Who he is.
Well, we could have easily picked Athena instead of Eminence Front, and there's a incredibly wordy song, and again, brilliant vocal by Roger, taking Pete's words. I mean, it's a tongue twister of a lyric.
Yeah,
it's a very clever lyric.
Well, and that song actually started out as Teresa. So one of the things that Pete did, and I love this, that he released, the first one came out in 1983. He released a series of albums called Scoop 1, Scoop 2, Scoop 3, which is all his demos. And actually, you could make an album of a lot of those songs, and it would basically be like McCartney 2. So Paul McCartney put out McCartney 2 in 1980, which is pretty much just demos and like noodlings, Well, Pete was doing the same thing. He just wasn't putting them out as official albums. It was like, here's my demos, where Paul was like, here's my new album, and everybody's like, what? These sound like demos. Okay, whatever. But anyway, so Pete's been doing this all along, and he started releasing them in 1983. And that song was actually called Teresa initially. And if you listen to that version of the song, it's angry and frustrated because it was written about Teresa Russell, who was an actress that he had fallen in love with, because Pete falls in love with every woman he meets within like 10 minutes. And it's like he's completely smitten.
What was the movie she was in? She played Marilyn Monroe, and she gets together with Joe DiMaggio and, oh God, Insignificance. What a cool movie. I haven't seen that since I was a teenager. I need to find that again. What an incredible movie.
Well, she was in a movie with Art Garfunkel that has like a lot of, it's a very sexual, like lots of nude scenes and stuff. And
yeah, she was nude in a lot of movies.
Well, that's when Pete fell in love with her and was like actually, kind of hanging out with her. But she was married to Nicholas Roeg, who's the director of The Man Who Fell to Earth, and
directed Insignificance. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. So anyway, she rejected him, so he went home and wrote this song and recorded it, and because he always had a home studio and he always had like a traveling. So everywhere he went, he had a place where he could record songs, which he did constantly. And that's why he's got so many demos. And most of his demos are like very fleshed out, like whole songs. So that version of it doesn't have that part where it says she's a bomb. It's just, she's a girl, it's so much different. It just has such a different vibe with the rejection, the anger. When they added that she's a bomb, I always, actually, for one thing, I never knew I always thought they were saying she's a whore. When I heard that song, like in the 80s.
I hope that's not how Teresa heard it.
I don't know. That's just, I never knew they were saying she's a bomb until I could actually go and read the lyrics at one point. I'm like, oh, that's what it is.
Pete's such a good singer, too. It's a girl. Love that.
I love that too. And whenever they utilize Roger and Pete's voices together like that, because they're so contrasting, like they're so different. And I think that does add a lot to that song. And that song was a hit. I mean, it was I don't know how high it charted, but it was definitely a top 40 hit.
He's a really good singer. I mean, if you look at the live clips where he's always on note, he's never off key. Always hits the notes, and he pushes it too. I mean, he doesn't sing just like the record. He adds flourishes.
And Pete, and he sings at a very high register too, and he has a very interesting voice. I really love his voice, actually. And he has a vulnerability in his voice that is what the songs are written for oftentimes. He does kind of try to tweak his writing for The Who to fit Roger, but Roger is still singing those more vulnerable autobiographical lyrics, but they just come across in such a completely opposite manner. And so it's so interesting to hear Pete sing, like on his demos, songs that actually were recorded by The Who.
All right. So we're coming up close to the hour mark. I don't know if I want to get into John Mellencamp this episode because it's going to require a little more time.
Sorry, if I'm going to talk about Pete or The Who, I just can't. I can't pare it down.
I absolutely knew that going in, and I figured that would be the case, and that's just fine. But you did bring up Paul McCartney, and I do want to talk about Paul because something we talked about, I think, very early on when we started doing these podcasts. We talked about our musical likes and how you're such a big Beatles fan, and I am too. We're both huge Beatles fans, both very knowledgeable about Beatles music, know it inside out. But you take it a little farther. You're way more into the solo careers of all the individual Beatles, where I embarrassingly had very little of the Beatles solo music in my life for many years. I mean, Paul McCartney and Wings would have been one of my favorites as a kid in the 70s, but I only knew the hit songs. I didn't listen to the LPs, the studio albums. The only one that I've really had over the years, over the long haul, is Band on the Run. And then for John Lennon, the only one I had for years was the John Lennon collection on CD, the greatest hits.
Mm-hmm.
George Harrison, really nothing. I mean, I had a Dark Horse greatest hits album for a while. I didn't like enough of it to keep it around. And then Ringo Starr, nothing, although.
Yeah. Oh, Ringo.
Oh, poor Ringo.
Poor Ringo.
Although I love the hit songs off Ringo, You're 16 and Photograph, both great. And those are songs I would have played to death as a kid. So only very recently have I started to get a bunch more of the Beatles solo things and start listening to them. And an album I've been listening to more than just about anything else for the past month and a half is Wings' first album, Wildlife, which got absolutely slaughtered by music critics at the time. This was his third album release since splitting from the Beatles. So his first one was the McCartney, the Bowl of Cherries album, and then Ram, which was billed to Paul and Linda McCartney. So this album was billed to just Wings. Didn't even have McCartney's name on the album cover, right? Just Wings.
Which maybe he did that intentionally too, because he didn't really necessarily maybe want people to connect with him.
No, I think that's true. None of this stuff was particularly well reviewed at the time because everything's being compared to the Beatles. You get to Wildlife, and Paul specifically wanted kind of a lo-fi approach to the record, not a lot of production value to it, a live sound. He kind of pushed that to its furthest extent with the first track on the album. He was just messing around, jamming in the studio, and the engineer turned the record button on, and away they go. It's called Mumbo. It's just a studio jam, but it's a cool groovy riff. From there, you get Bip Bop, which is like this country blues pastiche with some really cool blues guitar going on. And just kind of nonsense lyrics. Mumbo is just him vocally riffing, just not even words, just like sounds. And this is how the album starts. And so you get, all these people expecting the next Let It Be or Yesterday or some brilliant. They're like, what is this shit? I mean, what are we doing here? But I love this album. I really do. I mean, even the songs on first listen or two that were, you just hear they're just total throwaways. Like I'm Your Singer. Even that is starting to sing. I mean, it's just got this charm to it that's undeniable. I have the utmost respect for Paul and this record because this is Paul McCartney doing just what he damn well pleases. He's getting absolutely blasted stoned and playing music, just messing around with his band, and they're just playing. And then the tour with this record was very low key. I think they played university halls. They traveled very low budget.
On a bus with his family and all the kids in tow. And
he's just doing what he wants to do. He's not trying to live up to anybody's high expectations or standards or, you got to write the next huge anthem. And then you've got the whole dynamic with him and John Lennon going on in 70 and 71, the kind of back and forth in song that they're having. And Lennon's perceiving of getting slights from Paul, responding with How Do You Sleep on Imagine. Another album.
Is one of the most brutal songs ever recorded. And honestly, whatever he felt slighted by Paul was so minimal compared to what he did on How Do You Sleep with George. George is on that song too.
You would be more knowledgeable about this than I. I mean, I haven't studied in detail about the songs on Wildlife or the meaning, but it seems to me he's still taking digs at John here. The song Wildlife as a dig at John specifically. You listen to the lyrics, a lot of political nonsense in the air. You're making it hot with the way you breathe in there. And the way he sings it is kind of like John Lennon's Primal Scream influenced songs with that lyric, right? Vocally just out on the cutting edge.
Yeah, true.
I mean, Dear Friend seems to be pointed toward John Lennon. I think Paul has said as much. Cop to that. So you've got that interesting element going on. But I hear this album, it's just like, it's a stoner classic. This album is just, it's just light up a fatty, breathe in deep, and just kick back. It's just, there's nothing too challenging about this album, but it's just fun, relaxed, cool music. It's lo-fi, and I love it.
When you first mentioned this to me, you said, I'm loving Wildlife. And I was like, are you talking about Wings Wildlife or something else I don't know? Because what? But you said that, being able to go now and listen to this without the preconceived ideas about what to expect or how much it's been panned or, this idea about what everybody thinks about this album and just take it for face value.
George Michael, brilliant album title, Listen Without Prejudice. Listen without prejudice. That could be the theme to our podcast because we're going back. We're not trying to pick the coolest songs from these years.
Right.
We're just picking purely based on musical value, what it means to us. We don't care who else likes it.
Yeah.
The fact is we're hewing close to the mainstream, but it's designed for a group gathering. So it's supposed to be music that other people can enjoy too. We're not trying to prove our cool credentials. And you can't listen to these albums and say, well, it's not the Beatles. No, it's not the Beatles. It's not.
Right.
It's something else. It's Paul doing what he wants, doing it with his wife, and he got trashed for that, just like John Lennon got trashed for doing stuff with Yoko Ono. They wanted to be with their spouses. They wanted to spend time. They wanted them involved in their lives. Fine. What's
well,
wrong
and
with
it
that?
was different too because Yoko actually is an artist and was, she wasn't necessarily a recording artist before she met John, but she was in the art community. And Linda, she is a photographer, so she is artistic.
She's an artist,
but she had never had intentions to be a musician. And Paul just kind of drug her along, like, "Come on, I don't want to be away apart from you, so you're in the band now." And she was like, "All right," Whereas Yoko definitely was taking center stage and had her art too that she wanted to be part of what they were doing together.
The song where her presence is most strongly felt is "I'm Your Singer," and she's no great singer. That's clear. But it's charming. It's got a nice melody. It sinks in after a while.
Well, you also hear her a lot on Love is Strange.
Let's talk about that too. Again, I'm
Love
sure
that song.
I'm sure Paul's stoned as hell when he's doing this.
Yeah.
It's 1971. This is before Paul Simon, Mother and Child Reunion. This is before Johnny Nash, I Could See Clearly Now. They're doing reggae. I mean, this is early on. This is very early on for a white pop rock star to be doing reggae music. I mean, what are some other examples in 70 and 71?
He didn't write that song, but
no,
it's
a Mickey and Sylvia song.
Yeah, which I love the original too. Like it's a great song. But yeah, he puts a reggae spin to it.
Yeah, but who else is doing that at this time? Who else is doing reggae at this time? He's ahead of the curve.
You're right, he is.
72 was really the year that reggae kind of went mainstream.
Yeah.
This is 71. This is ahead of that curve.
Yeah.
Does he ever get credit for that? No.
Because everybody dismissed this so hard when it came out. This is both the frustration and the genius of Paul McCartney. Is that he's just doing what he wants to do. Part of it, I think, comes from this, well, if no one likes it, then I can just say, oh, I was just stoned and it was just for fun. I wasn't really trying. But if people then go back and maybe reassess it and are like, he was doing something really, then it's like, oh yeah, I meant to do that, where I don't think that's really where he's coming from. I think that he is obviously a genius. We've talked about this, you and I. Paul can do no wrong. It does not matter what he does. It still is going to be either listenable, brilliant, or, just like fine. Like there's nothing horrible that he does. And he really can do no wrong. But I think that he just kind of throws everything out there. And if it sticks, it does. If it doesn't, that's okay. I'm just having fun. It's, it's no big deal. I mean, he didn't do that necessarily once he got more into the 90s, but definitely the 70s, Paul, is that. And he has so much music that really does sound like I was saying with Pete Townsend and his demos. Most of Pete's demos sound way more produced and rehearsed, just the demos he's doing, than what Paul is releasing on his actual album in the 70s. Which it's not surprising because Paul was living in Scotland on a farm with a bunch of animals and just smoking pot all day. He had a very hippie existence in that way. And the music reflects that.
Yeah. Well, it's lo-fi, and that's well ahead of its time. I mean, there was the movement in the 90s, but it's charming. I just love the sound. I love the sounds of that era. So just about anything coming out in the early 70s, just the guitar sounds, the way things were recorded then, the warmth, whatever the amplifiers they were using, whatever, everything that's some of my favorite sounds in pop and rock music. And there's some great nasty guitar sounds on that record that I really like. I mean, Paul and Denny Lane playing the guitars on that. Denny Sewell, very solid drummer on that album.
And I think, we've talked about this, about the 70s, like how I don't like the Rolling Stones and the Faces and kind of like that loose, druggy.
And I do.
That
very
kind
much.
Of stuff to me feels like, when you're with a group of people and they're all like high or drunk and you're not. Mm-hmm. That's how I feel when I listen to the Stones and the Faces.
That's a good analogy.
And that kind of stuff.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
When I listen to Paul's stuff, even though, he might be high and stuff and I'm not, there's something about it
it's
that's
inclusive.
Still warm
it's
and inclusive. It brings you, it still draws you in a way that you're just kind of like, oh yeah, I can groove with this. Like it feels very natural in that way.
It's warm and it's charming.
Yes. I do have to go back and listen to Wildlife more because I did have that jaded opinion about it when you first mentioned that you were listening to it, but I have listened to it quite a bit.
I've listened to that album probably more than I've listened to Band on the Run in my life by now. I've been hammering that thing. I love it.
It's
anyway,
still way better than Wings at the Speed of Sound.
I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, I want to know. You got to get there at some point so we can talk about it.
Red Rose Speedway is next. We'll see how that one is. But
that one is pleasantly surprising to me, actually.
Good. Yeah, I had to get my confessional out there, and you brought up Paul McCartney. So, and I wanted to save John Cougar until our final episode, so it isn't completely dominated by your husband. So I'll have something to talk about.
Actually, I did remember there is another song I have.
Oh.
I Melt With You.
Oh, that's right.
So we do have a lot to cover.
So we'll all have something to talk about when we next get together on Matt and Sheryl's Gen Excellent playlist. But for this go around, we are adding Donna Summer's Love Is in Control, Finger on the Trigger to the playlist. It's actually moving over from the alternate playlist I've been curating. We put that forward for the Toto presence on that song. So it's going to move from the alternate playlist to the main playlist. And in its place, I'm going to put State of Independence, which we also talked about during the Toto episode. Completely different vibe to that track. Love that one as well.
Love that song.
Sheryl's song choice for this episode is The Who's Eminence Front. And we covered the bases with Pete Townshend's solo album from that year, All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes. So when we next get together, John Cougar's Jack and Diane, I Melt With You by Modern English, and Mike will grace us with his presence and pick his album and song of the year for 1982. And we'll also talk about all the extras and also rens that didn't quite make it for us. Definitely want to talk about
long list.
Definitely want to talk about Neil Young's album from 1982.
Yeah.
There, which was a revelation of a listen for me in a very good way. Another album that was absolutely trashed at the time of its release.
Another reason why I love doing this podcast, because it forces us to go back and listen to this stuff with totally different ears.
Right. But you're just going to have to wait until that next time. Until then, thanks for joining us. I'm Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
Take care, everybody. Goodbye.